We are ready for chapter 1 in the book. If you have a copy of the book. This chapter is entitled The Immigration Dilemma. And I realize that not everyone believes that this is a dilemma, but we were going to look at some things that perhaps will clear things up or muddy the waters or whatever the right terminology is. So we just spent it's been 2 weeks now, we spent considerable time just kind of laying some foundation here, but in chapter 1 sets things up for the direction this book intends to go. So let me read. Let me see how far we want to read down here. Let me read the first half of page 3, I guess it is. I know some of you don't have a book, and so if you don't mind, I'm just going to read it. This introduction to this chapter was written by Mark Roberts, who is an evangelical pastor, professor, and author. It says, some Christians on either side of this debate insist that this issue is not complex. For them it is simply a matter of either legality or justice for the poor. But denying the complexity of this issue is both intellectually wrong and practically unhelpful. If we aren't willing to deal with the intricacy of this issue, we won't ever be able to make headway in solving it. And then the chapter starts off with this. Nearly everyone seems to agree that we have an immigration problem in the United States. The exact nature of the problem, though, is heatedly disputed. What do you think about these opening statements? Is this a complex issue, or is this as simple as we hear? And if so, why? Why do you say that? This is a part where you share your opinions and we'll talk about them.
From reading farther into this book, it certainly isn't a simple thing to get entrance into our country.
I'll be honest with you, when I read this book, this was the chapter that I was most disappointed in, because I came, probably like you, I came into this book with preconceived ideas. And the more you read about the things that are going on, the more you realize how complex it really is. So maybe we'll just jump into this thing and see what you think after that. Starting where I left off here, it said, from one perspective, our nation is facing an unprecedented invasion of, quote, illegal aliens who violate our laws upon entry and then become a drain on social services and public education systems. They depress wages and displace native-born American workers, and then contribute to an increase in poverty, crime rates, and even terrorism. A campaign flyer for a candidate in Carpentersville, Illinois, City Council in 2007, the book says some years ago, but I looked up the footnote, expresses the frustrations of many Americans. This campaign literature said, are you tired of waiting to pay for your groceries while illegal aliens pay with food stamps and then go outside and get in a $40,000 car? Are you tired of paying taxes when illegal aliens pay none? Are you tired of reading that another illegal alien was arrested for drug dealing? Are you tired of having to punch one for English?
Amen.
Yeah.
Hit a sore spot, huh? Are you tired of seeing multiple families in our homes? Are you tired of not being able to use Carpenter Park and you can substitute whatever park you want? Are you tired of being able to use, not being able to use Carpenter Park on the weekend because it's overrun by illegal aliens? And the last one, are you tired of seeing the Mexican flag flown above our flag? What do you think of this perspective? You agree with all of that, huh? Okay.
The word illegal, is what bothers me.
Okay. Why are they illegal?
Because they have not applied for citizenship or are not here legally.
Okay. The book is going to pick the definition of illegal apart a little later here, but essentially what you're saying is they don't have the correct legal status for being in this country legally. Okay. And we're going to talk about what those statuses are.
While on the other hand, of course I know you don't do unto others. You do unto others as you would have them do to you. But an American can't go into some other country illegally.
No, but I can go into another country. The Army can assign me to another country.
The Army,
yeah.
Right. But not as just a private citizen.
Okay. You have a good...
Mexico and get in trouble.
You have a good point. You have a good point. There are laws in the land. We're going to talk about that. All right. Anything else? Yes?
Well, I agree with Shirley that, they do need to apply, but I know I have a friend that's, she's one of my closest friends. She has dual citizenship, but her husband's from Egypt, and he's had to get, but how do you know? My daughter has a friend that's Hispanic, but her dad's in Mexico, and they can't see him because he doesn't have his citizenship. So, we just don't know who's legal. Us, and who's legal and who's not.
We're going to talk about that too. A little later on, especially in the second chapter, one of the questions they ask is, well, who are these illegal aliens? Who are these people that are here undocumented? And that's really what you're talking about. The term illegal really just means undocumented.
Right.
It'd be kind of like if you were driving your car without a license. Okay.
You'd be in trouble.
So when you compare undocumented to the term illegal, it causes connotations, doesn't it? Illegal is bad. Driving without a license, I forgot my license, or it expired, I forgot to renew it. Okay.
Our driver's license.
Yeah. So when you hear things like this and you get concerned about the illegal portion of their status, understand that it's just a bookkeeping status. Okay? So, when we were talking about this, you remember the question I said we asked, that I heard asked when we were talking about doing this class? I'll go back and read it to you again. Why should we even have this discussion if they are here illegally? That makes them lawbreakers and criminals. Do you hear that we and they in this perspective we just read? Let me read it again. Are you tired of waiting to pay for groceries while illegal aliens pay with food stamps? We and they? Are you tired of reading that another illegal alien was arrested for drug dealing? I don't deal with drugs. They deal with drugs. It's we and they. Do you hear that? Are you tired of having to punch one for English? Why is that an irritant?
Even after you punch one for
Why don't they have
you can't
to punch
understand
one
who you're talking
whatever for Spanish if they want it in that?
Yep. If they come here,
One of the things I have about their speech is many of them can speak as good at English as you and I are, but if they're talking to each other, they talk in Spanish. And I had neighbors that did that, and they were wonderful people. I love them. But they're talking about me probably when they're standing over there in their yard talking. And
oh no!
so I can hear what they're saying. I didn't like it. And I went to Texas in 42 with Emmett and the Army. I was scared to death of those Mexican people because I couldn't understand, didn't know what they were saying.
So
they wasn't going to harm me one little bit.
That's right.
But I'll tell you something else about this program too. Now, I came from Arkansas about before the cotton pickers came in. And those farmers down there, literally the last few years, had to bring in the Mexican workers because our people in the area would not gather their crops in. And now, I don't know if
they were unwilling to do
or illegal.
Yeah, they were unwilling to do the
I
job.
know that is a fact.
Yeah. All right. Show of hands. Who has ever traveled outside the United States?
Mexico.
As you've traveled outside the United States, how nice is it to hear your own language?
Wonderful.
How nice is it to be able to ask a question, where's the toilet? You know, how do I get out of here? I'm lost, you know. I'm surrounded by people that speak a whole nother language, okay? So, I understand.
Have you ever noticed that whenever we're trying to communicate with someone in another language, we tend to speak really loud, like...
Yeah, yeah. Where is the bathroom? Well, I don't mean to make fun of anybody, because I've been in that situation too, okay? When you are in a foreign land and you don't understand the language, when you're with your spouse or your friends, what language do you revert back to? Your language, okay? And so as you're walking down the street with your wife or your kids or something like that, and you say, oh look, you know, isn't that a nice thing to take a picture of? Oh look, I didn't know that they did this here. And everybody on the street that doesn't speak your language is saying,
What's wrong?
are they talking about me? So, it is understandable when foreigners are in a foreign land, they tend to speak the language that they know. And when they come to live in the land and become high enough numbers that businesses want to sell products to these individuals, they tend to make their recording devices give them an option in that language. Now, Debbie and I have been to Germany, and when you go into the airport in Germany, it is not unusual to see information signs in 4 or 5 different languages, okay? Sometimes the announcements, if you get on board an aircraft, especially if you get on board an aircraft in Egypt or something like that, they'll do the safety announcements in Egyptian, and they'll do them again in English, okay?
But that has been my one thing that I have felt is they need to learn our language if they want to come and live in our country. And now they probably think...
But how soon?
But if our missionaries go to these foreign countries, don't they have to know quite a bit of their language before they would be allowed?
The word you said was have to know, okay? Most schools will teach them you should know the language because that's the best way to communicate with them. It's not that you have to know the language, it's that you're more effective if you can learn the language.
If you can't speak their language, how can you tell them about Jesus?
Yes, yes.
Matthew and Mary went to Brazil. Even before they left, they took lessons in Portuguese. And so they were familiar with the language.
Basics.
When they got down there, they were fluent in it when they came back. And when they spoke it when they were down there. The only time they spoke English was when we visited, I think. You know, and they tried to teach us the Portuguese. So they realized the value of learning the language and communicating and telling them about Jesus in their language.
There's no doubt. There's value in learning the language of the country that you're attempting to live in. There's no doubt. But we are in the process of dealing with large numbers of people that speak foreign languages, and that's one thing that's an irritant to us, a turnoff.
Children too, we have to remember that.
Yeah.
These people that are coming into our country that don't speak our language, they are still God's children, and He loves them like He loves us.
Hang on to that thought. We're going to talk about that. Bill, you had your hand up.
Yeah, you two amaze me. I travel quite a bit for work, and people I travel with would just get upset like everything. We're in a foreign country, and they get upset because the guy doesn't speak English. That just blew me away. I tried to explain to them, and they get mad at me.
I don't know if I've told this story before. Debbie knows what story I'm getting ready to tell. When we were stationed in Germany, we'd visit the little surrounding countries around Germany, and it was always an exercise in frustration trying to find out where's the restrooms, where's the restaurant, where's this, where's that, how do you order off the menu in different languages. So we planned a vacation to go to Great Britain. And I remember telling Debbie, this is going to be great. When we go to Great Britain, they speak English, you know. We're going to be able to speak English with these people. We went into this pub and tried to order fish and chips, and I swear I could not understand that woman. She had a Cockney accent, and she was trying to tell me that it was something like 2.5 pence for this meal, and I looked at her. You are speaking in English, right? Not the King's English.
There's
Okay.
also some things that even differ with them. When we like to speak at the hood of the car, they call it the bonnet.
Yeah. Different terms for umbrella, for parts of the car. Absolutely. So, yes. When you live in a foreign country, yes, it's nice to assimilate the language. But in the meantime, you got to understand there's some folks that, like us, they're a little slow to learn new languages. They prefer to hear, they prefer to hear it in their own language. And so, you know, is it that big a thing to ask that if I want to speak to a customer service rep, I can punch 1 and hear it in a different language? Okay? And that's what they're saying.
Now, me with my neighbors next door, I never even thought about learning to speak a little Spanish, so I know what they were saying.
Yeah, yeah.
It occurred to me.
All right, well, you got something?
The schools have English as a second language, and they have teachers that are teaching that to the foreign students. When our daughter-in-law and my son lived in Atlanta, she taught there, and there were 43 different languages that people were speaking coming in. And if you ever go where we go in the wintertime, around Orlando, it's rare to hear someone speaking English because they're from all over the world.
Do you remember me telling you how many languages they spoke at Fairfax? When we lived in Virginia, Fairfax County school system was the largest school system in the state of Virginia. And I had the lunch lady one time on a conversation tell me they had to be able to speak or communicate or teach it was pretty close to 40-some languages. I don't remember what it was. It was a very large number of languages because Fairfax, around Washington, D.C., was where diplomats' kids and immigrants and everybody else was participating in that school system, and it has become a big issue for educators. But if you want people to be able to speak in English, you have to teach it. You have to teach it. And to teach it, you have to be able to speak in their language so you can teach English to them. Dick, did I see your hand go up? Forgot. Wasn't you. Okay.
A funny story my sister-in-law had when they had problems in Bosnia and also had to be Spanish, Mexican. A new student came into the school and he kept asking Daniel. And she said, yes, we have a band, but they only meet on Tuesday. And this conversation evidently went on for a while, and all he needed was where's the bathroom.
Well, no, you want a bathroom. It was getting serious.
It's the restaurant. But it was, we had heard her story.
All right. Well,
It was much longer.
let's read a little further here. Others see the current state of immigration as a problem for very different reasons. They see millions of people who have, usually for economic reasons, accepted displacement from their home countries to pursue a better life for themselves and their families in the United States, just as generations of immigrants have done before them. Tragically, from this perspective, these people are not welcomed into our society. They are scapegoated and forced into shadowy existence by broken immigration laws, even though they contribute to our nation's economy by performing a host of jobs, most of which few native-born Americans are willing to do. Undocumented immigrant Elvira Arellano spent a year living inside a Methodist church in Chicago in an ultimately unsuccessful attempt to avoid deportation that would separate her from her 8-year-old son, who was U.S. citizen born. She became a spokesman for this second perspective. Now remember, the first perspective was, I'm here first, essentially, why do I have to change, okay? Aren't you tired of hearing punch one for English, you know? Aren't you tired of people using food stamps and then getting into the 40%? Now here's the other perspective. Out of fear and hatred of an enemy you cannot find, you have set out to destroy our lives and our families. As you knocked on my door, you are knocking on thousands of doors, ripping mothers and fathers away from their terrified children. You have a list of Social Security no-match numbers, and you are following that list as if we were terrorists and criminals instead of workers with families. You are denying us work and seniority and benefits we have earned, and you are taking the property we have saved for and purchased. What is this perspective saying? It's basically just saying, what choice do I have? You have made it so difficult to legally immigrate that I am forced to break the law to come here to provide for my families. Now, I'm not saying it's right. There are misconceptions to both of these perceptions, okay? And you can pick them both apart. You can pick apart the first one, you can pick apart the second one. All I'm saying is this is a perspective for your consideration.
Tom, is it even legal or illegal to own property?
Yes.
It is.
Yes. And even if they don't buy a house, okay, they're paying taxes when they're paying rent, because a portion of that rent goes to paying taxes. Whenever they buy something from the store, they're paying taxes just like you and I pay taxes. When they're working at a business, if they can get a job at a business, because if you don't have a green card, you can't legally work at a business. But let's just say they got a job at a business, like most of us, we work on seniority, right? You tend to get better benefits when you have more seniority. If you can't keep working at that same business because you keep getting deported, there goes your seniority. So I'm not saying it's right. It is breaking the law. There are misconceptions, but there's another perspective to consider. Perspective 2 kind of comes from the position of, does the punishment fit the crime? That's why I was probing a little bit when Shirley said up here, I don't like the fact that they're illegal, okay? What they are really is undocumented. That makes them illegal.
But they know that when they come into the country.
Yes, but remember this perspective I was just saying? The country I'm living in is either run by gangs, or it's run by thugs, or I'm being raped, or my children are being prosecuted. I'm fleeing this violence, and I'm asking to go someplace and just be given a chance. I'm not saying it's right. It's still illegal to come into the country. That's the other perspective. Okay? Yes, sir.
Well, it's illegal for us to leave the country too, undocumented. And now that was going up to Niagara Falls one time and got up there fairly close to it, and there was a sign on the side of the highway that said Canadian border straight ahead. We do not possess passports, so we know we can't cross the border. Just beyond that sign, there's a highway, turn right. We took a I went to the right.
I said, don't take us over.
Yes, because we did not want to be detained at the Canadian border.
And still you were, right?
And so, I have a friend now who went to Canada one time to buy a machine. He drove up there to see the machine in operation before he bought it. Going north, he crossed the border with no problem. He had proper documentation. And he bought the machine. And when he hooked that machine on his truck to bring it back to the United States and got down to the border, he did have some problems pulling that machine across the border. They did let him cross, but it wasn't the line. I remember you went up, you know.
Yeah.
He did have to prove by documentation that he bought the machine, that the license on his truck was heavy enough to haul the machine, even though it was on the wheels, it counts to the weight. It wasn't as much fun coming back as it was going up. And so, the explanation that you just gave, which I'm sure come out of this book, I read the book. I know it's in here and it's come out there, but these, what we're trying to avoid calling them illegal, they just said that they are trying to flee corruption and gang violence and every bad thing imaginable that can happen to a human being, and then they want to come here, however they get here, documented or undocumented, into a country that they say the immigration law is broken. The same thing they say they want to escape where they come from. And no, we don't want to forget that the Bible tells us that God's word is sharper than a two-edged sword. There was a wise man said, as a matter of fact, he said this several times, when you want to move, be sure you move toward something you want instead of away from something that you don't want.
Yeah, we've experienced similar things on the border. I mean, when you go from the American side over to the Mexican side, it's like, you know, mile across, you know. But you get ready to come back the other side, pull your car over here. We want to have the drug sniffing dogs come by, you know. We want to. Well, I've never been patted down, but certainly they ask a lot of questions. Why are you there? You know, what were you, are you bringing anything back, any contraband back?
Walking, you get in, it's fine, but you got to prove that you are American citizens if you want to get out.
That's right.
We almost didn't get back from Canada one year.
Yes.
Well, two things in reference to that. I mean, African Americans get treated the same way every day, but also I was going to say, we went through Compassion International to sponsor a child, and there's a lot of programs out there that help families establish a way to work, kids to go to school, so they can stay in their country. So,
yeah. Okay. Yes.
Well, we experienced that same thing here in our own country. I have a daughter that completed her college education in Texas, and I went down there one time to visit my daughter, and I was on my way back. I happened to wake up early and left early, and I might have been exceeding the speed limit just a little bit.
Just maybe.
Yeah, just a little bit. It was dark in the morning, and suddenly I seen some red lights, and I thought I'd better stop. And I did, and that guy walked up the side of my truck and looked at my license after he demanded to see them. And he said, "What are you doing down here in Texas?" Well, I had my documentation where I had been, and it wasn't too far away from where I was talking to him, so, you know. He said, you know, told me what I should do.
Yeah.
Get on back where I'm going.
Well, you bring up a good point. I mean, some of the things that that immigrants, not Mexicans, some of the things that immigrants are experiencing remind you of a lot of the discrimination black Americans have been complaining about for years. And getting pulled over, asked to produce documentation just for driving, being black, you know. So we're used to, for the most part, policemen who are honest, and if a policeman pulls you over, it's nothing to be afraid of. If you don't have the right documented status, it's a very fearful thing to be around policemen, you know. So, any other thoughts before we move on?
Can I just add one thing? You know, there's something I learned about the Muslims too in Iraq, and they are the most honest people as far as stealing from you that I know of in the world. They will not cheat you out of anything.
That's good.
I had an occasion, they have small places where they're selling rings and all this, and I was trying to purchase one, and the guy, I was having trouble with, you know, I was like, you wanted more money? I tried to give him more money, he wouldn't take it. No, he wasn't going to sell it to me. Finally, he saw some guy that spoke English, was passing by, and he called him in. And the guy says, you're trying to pay him too much for it. I'm convinced you could leave a wallet laying on a park bench. Thousands of them walk by, they won't touch it.
Yeah.
They're just absolutely the most honest people in that respect. They will not steal.
Cultures are different. We've got time for, after you consider these two perspectives, I have to insert a Bible verse. We haven't had a Bible verse yet. It's one that we looked at a few weeks ago. It's in Matthew 7, verse 12. It says, in everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you. For this is the law and the prophets. When you talk about how we treat undocumented people, we are not treating them the way that we'd like to be treated. And as Christians, we need to consider some of the things we hear from a Christian perspective and some of the things that we learn from meeting people in this particular situation. I really don't want to get into this next topic, but let me just give you something to read for next week, okay? One of the things that's changed in our immigration dilemma, if you want to call it that, crisis, problem, whatever your favorite term is, okay, is the fact that there are these large bands of people forming down south and trying to come this way. You've heard it talked about these caravans, okay? What they are attempting to do is come into the United States as refugees, asylum, okay? Most of us don't understand what that means. On page 61, in your book, if you have a book, there's a discussion about the Refugee Act of 1980, and I have an article that I took out of Time magazine I'll share with you next week. The United States passed a law back in 1980 that we would accept refugees, grant them asylum status for legal residence if they met certain qualifications. So when you're talking about the difference between people who are trying to slip across the border undetected, that's what most of us think of illegal aliens, okay? The majority of people that are coming towards the United States now are attempting to pass through at the regular checkpoints, ports of entry, and request asylum as refugees. So for next week, read up about what a refugee is and what the law allows and what the stuff is, and then we'll talk about that next week. Thank you for your comments.